We're live. Hello, everybody. Good morning from Vienna in Austria. I'd love it if you could tell us in the chat where you're tuning in from. It's so good to see you all. And welcome. Welcome to the 6-week free JavaScript bootcamp. Love to see you all here. Thank you so much for joining and embarking on this journey with us. It's going to be a lot of fun. We're going to learn a lot, and we're just going to take it at our own pace, remember? And it's going to be a lot of fun. So, yes, love to see it. Hello from the Bahamas, from Kenya. Hello. Love to see everybody tuning in. If you've got double sound coming, make sure that you're not watching it on two places. You should be able to hear it only once. I'm just going to double check in YouTube that it sounds okay. Give me 1 second, folks, just to make sure that everything's YouTube should be sounding okay. Let's check. Twitch should be sounding okay as well. As said, if you're hearing double sound, make sure it's not coming in twice. But yeah, how fun. Cool. So again, welcome. Good to see you all here from Pakistan, everywhere in the world. A couple things before we get started. I just want to throw out a couple of reminders before we get started. First of all, if you're watching this late at night, don't stress about it. Remember that these videos are going to be recorded. This is a bootcamp that you're supposed to follow at your own pace. You also need to be well rested so that you can be successful as a developer. And yeah, let's kick right into it. If you're tuning in for the first time, just a couple of things. First of all, this is the Class Central JavaScript Bootcamp. You'll find more information on the bootcamp in classcentral.com. There you'll be able to sign up and follow along. If you want to collaborate with your fellow learners, which I absolutely encourage that you do, find it at group.classcentral.com. That's where you'll find the forum. You'll also find on these two links the link to our Discord. We've got a Discord community where you can join in and help each other out and ask questions and that sort of thing. And finally, if you've got any issues with the bootcamp, always please feel free to email us at bootcamp@class-central.com. With all of that said, let's kick right into it. We've got a lot to cover. So let's first look at our platform that we'll be using in order to learn. So I'm sharing my screen now. Please let me know if the text should be a little bit bigger. And we've got FreeCodeCamp.com. This is going to be the place where we go to learn JavaScript for the next 6 weeks. So you'll go to FreeCodeCamp.org to follow along. Now, if you want to just watch the streams and then follow along later on at your own pace, that's totally fine and something I actively encourage. So let's make it a little bit bigger. Hope that's okay. People are saying in the chat, please make it bigger. Absolutely. Yeah. Again, if it can be bigger, please even let me know. So I've already signed up for FreeCodeCamp, so you should see my account here. But go and make an account. It's absolutely free. And then you'll go to Get Started here. Now, we've got a lot of kinds of certifications that we can make at FreeCodeCamp, but we will be starting today with JavaScript algorithms and data structures certification. There's also the responsive web design certification that my friend Jess is going to be teaching later on today. So if you want to join that bootcamp, again, go to classcentral.com. But no, we'll be doing JavaScript algorithms and data structures. So just a brief introduction into JavaScript itself. It's a programming language that is a piece of text that we write in order to execute code either on our web browsers or on the server. Now, in this bootcamp, we'll be learning the language itself, how it works, what kind of algorithms and data structures we can do with it. It's going to be a lot. So don't worry, we're in this together. It's going to be a lot of fun. And we'll be starting, first of all, with the first course, which is Basic JavaScript. But there's a bunch of others as well. Let me just scroll down real quick. In fact, I'm going to collapse this real quick. ES6, is going to be something that we'll cover later on. Then we'll cover regular expressions. We're going to cover debugging. We're going to cover basic data structures. We're going to cover basic algorithm scripting. We're going to look at all this stuff. We're going to cover object-oriented programming, and we're going to be doing functional programming. And finally, we're going to be doing intermediate algorithm scripting. And the last part is going to be JavaScript algorithm and data structures projects. So we've got 5 projects we're going to do. We're going to do those later on in the bootcamp. And once you do all 5 of these, you'll be able to go get your free FreeCodeCamp certification. Now, to clarify, these you can do at any time. So there's no strict need to do these in 6 weeks. If you do it earlier, fantastic. If you do later, that's fine too. I'm doing the FreeCodeCamp certification with all of you, but I'm not working for them. I'm not working with Class Central either. I'm collaborating with them in order to be able to do all of these certifications. So let's scroll up and start with Basic JavaScript. This is going to be the first module. We're going to cover this for the next 4 sessions. JavaScript is a scripting language that you can use to make web pages interactive. It's one of the core technologies of the web, along with HTML and CSS, and is supported by all modern browsers. In this course, you'll learn fundamental programming concepts in JavaScript. You'll start with basic data structures like numbers and strings, and then you'll learn to work with arrays, objects, functions, loops, if-else statements, and more. That sounds like a lot, and it's going to be totally fine. We're going to be doing this at our own pace. And just to bear in mind, the way the lessons work is we're going to do a couple of lessons. We're going to do some of these exercises. And if you're asking questions, that's fantastic. We're going to dedicate a half hour after the lesson is done to answer all of those questions. But if you're reading this in the chat and you've got an answer to some of those questions, absolutely feel free to answer them. People are asking, for example, where's the Discord link? How many slides will I cover? What will these be recorded? Which, by the way, yes, they will be. They'll be here on YouTube. Remember, we've got a mentor, the wonderful Kiki, who will be helping you out, and answer them. If you know the answers, help each other out. This is supposed to be a collaborative process. But that's enough of my talking. Let's jump right in. So under Basic JavaScript, we've got 113 lessons to do. And we're going to start with the very first one, which is comment your JavaScript code. So I'm going to go ahead and click on that. Now, remember, I'm signed in, so that'll take me immediately to start doing the exercise. Just a little bit of water. I'm going to be talking a lot, so I need I need lots of water. So let's talk about what this looks like. On the left, you'll see the lesson description. We got a title, comment your JavaScript code. We've got a description of the exercise itself, as well as some buttons, run the tests, reset all code, and get help. If you click on get help, you'll also find get a hint, watch a video, or ask for help. This is meant to be a collaborative process. You'll also get some tests. Let's talk about tests for just a second. So these are the requirements in order to pass that lesson. So we can see here, you should create a comment that contains at least 5 letters. You should create another comment in this style that contains at least 5 letters. So that's the left-hand side of FreeCodeCamp. Now let's look at the right-hand side, because we got 2 things going on here. One is the code editor. Here I can write my code. I don't know, hello world. This is where I can write my code. Right now, this is giving me some underlines because this is incorrect code. But essentially, this is where I can write, which is fantastic. And down here, we've got our tests. So here, anything we write will show its output here. So with that said, let's jump right into the exercise. So the first exercise we're going to be doing is doing comments, which let's read real quick here. Comments are lines of code that JavaScript will intentionally ignore, which is interesting because when we're writing code, we normally don't think of the fact that we want to have it ignore our comments. So let's take a look at an example of a comment here. We've got 2 / characters, and it says, this is an inline comment. Now, what this is doing is telling JavaScript, let's say, hello, JavaScript learners. Now you see I've written the 2 / and written out some text. And this can be any text we want. Now, the purpose of a comment is, as the exercise says, to have JavaScript ignore it. But why would we want to have that? Again, this is going to be a way for us to leave ourselves notes. This is for us, the human programmer, where we're going to leave ourselves some notes so that when we're passing code to someone else, when we're collaborating, we can leave those out. Leave those in, pardon me. So JavaScript will ignore them, but the human, they're meant to read them. And that way we can sort of leave ourselves notes in order to understand our code better. And every programmer does this. Now, this is one way to write a comment. Hello, JavaScript learners. You can also make a multi-line comment beginning with the / and a star and ending with a star and a /. So let's try that too. So a / and a star. Hello and welcome. This is the first session of the JavaScript Bootcamp. And then an asterisk and a /. So again, this is multiple lines. This is also a comment. So hello and welcome. This is the first session of the JavaScript Bootcamp. So both of these will be ignored by the computer. We got a question here. Is JavaScript case sensitive? It is absolutely case sensitive. And we'll see more of that when we start actually writing code. What we're doing here is writing comments. So as you write code, you should regularly add comments to clarify the function of parts of your code. Good commenting can help communicate the intent of your code, which is exactly what we're trying to do. So the exercise we'll see here at the bottom, try creating one of each type of comment. So we got run the tests, reset all code, and get help. Now let's look at those tests again. You should create a / style comment that contains at least 5 letters. There we go, / and hello JavaScript learners. You should create a / star / style comment that contains at least 5 letters. And we've done that here as well. / star, lots of letters, star /. We got a question here from Tech Tidbits. In case you're writing an inline comment, is there a best practice like leaving 2 spaces from where the code ends and start the comment? Best practices are definitely a great question to ask. Let's leave these questions for the end when we do a dedicated Q&A session. Some folks will prefer to have those indents, some will not. We can look at that after the course session. But now that we've done both of these, we can go ahead and run our tests. And if it works, we're going to get a nice big celebration telling us you've done it, and we can move on to the next lesson. So I'm going to click on run all tests and cross my fingers. And there we go. Basic JavaScript, 1% complete. I'm going to pat myself on the back, and I encourage you all to do so. If you've done this bootcamp with me before, you're going to know we do pat, and we celebrate, and we move on to the next challenge. So submit and go to the next challenge. Hit that. And now we move on to the next exercise. In this exercise, we're going to and this is the way the bootcamp is going to work. We're going to go through all of these exercises and answer questions at the end. So the next exercise is to declare JavaScript variables. Now, if you haven't heard of them before, variables are a way for us to contain data in our JavaScript that we can refer to later on, regardless of its value. Now, that sounds like a lot. And in JavaScript, we can have lots of different types of variables. Data comes in different shapes and sizes, different forms. And you'll see here in the exercise, you've got some like undefined, null, Boolean, string, symbol, big int, number, and object. That's a lot of data types. And we'll be exploring these later on. So let's not concern ourselves yet what each of these means, because we're going to be focusing on them as we go through this bootcamp. But yes, we can store lots of types of different data in the form of a label. I like to think of variables like a box, a nice little box that has a title or a label. Let's say we've got a variable called name. We've got a box with name in it. With the label name. Now, what does this mean? This means that anytime we want to check what the value of this that is stored inside this box is, we can just say, hey, name, what is your value? But another thing we can do is tell it, hey, name, store this value. So we take this value and put it into our box. which is all well and good. But how do we declare a variable? We do that, and now we're going to write our first code. Let's do it. Let's do it. Let's type in var. So that's VAR. And somebody was asking about case sensitivity. It is all lowercase. VAR, short for variable, is all lowercase. We'll then leave a space, and now we'll declare the name of our variable. So for example, here we see on the left, we are declaring a variable called our name, which is our name. And then at the end, there's a semicolon. This tells JavaScript that we have reached the end of the line of code. So let's try it. Let's create a variable called our name, for example, just like that. Now, you might be wondering, what is stored in this variable? Now, here, we haven't actually stored anything in our variable yet. We've just declared it. We've told JavaScript, hey, we've got a variable, and the label, its name, let's call it label. The label of this variable, of this box, is our name. But we can give it any name, any label, pardon me. We could call it, for example, my name. Or we could call it apple. We could call it banana. We could call it box. Now you're noticing something I'm doing here is we're keeping it lower. We're having it start lowercase. But if we want to have a long variable name, we could have it be box label, for example. And here you notice I'm doing an uppercase L in line 1. This is called camel case, right? Where the first letter is lowercase, and then each new word is uppercase. Variable names can be made up of numbers, letters, $signs, or underscore, but may not contain spaces or start with a number. So let's be very, very clear. Variable names can start with a letter, but they cannot start with a number, and they cannot have spaces in them. So what does this mean? This means that we have a variable. Again, we've got a box, and its label is box label. But this can be anything. And remember, I'm doing this uppercase because this is camel case. So let's look at our test now. Use the var keyword to create a variable called my name. So let's do that. I'm going to delete my code here and type in var. That's how we declare a variable. And we will declare the variables called my name. Remember the semicolon at the end. So use the var keyword, which we did here, and we'll create a variable called my name there at the end. Now, folks, I see you're all asking questions. This is fantastic. Just to reiterate, we will have a dedicated Q&A session at the end. Please keep asking questions, and I'll answer so many of them at the end. We'll dedicate a good half hour to that. If you know the answers, please also answer them in chat. Help each other out. Cool. So here's our test. You should declare my name with the var keyword ending it with a semicolon. Let's run our tests. And there we go. Pat, pat. Nice. So now we're 2% of the way through. We'll just keep going. Now we're going to be storing values with the assignment operator. So this is where I was talking about. We've got our box. It's got a label. For example, before we look at the code, let's look at the lesson at the left. We've got a variable called my variable, and look what's happening here. We're using the equal sign to give it a value, to assign it a value. So that's the number 5. So we're taking our box, the label is my variable, and we're storing in it the number 5. So what we can do is declare a variable, my var, and we can also store a value in that variable, the number 5, which is all fantastic. But now let's look at our code. We've got some comments here. Remember, comments are ignored by JavaScript. So they're just notes that we leave ourselves. So we've got var a in line 2. And then in line 4, we've got a comment that says only change code below this line. So let's see our exercise. Assign the value 7 to the variable a. Let's do it. So remember, we can take our variable, which is a, use a space, and then the assignment operator, which is the equal sign, to then give it a value, and we want to assign the value 7. That is the number 7, which is all well and good, but let's never forget semicolon. So we've got a variable called a, and a is equals to 7. Fantastic. Let's take a look at the test real quick. You should not change code above the specified comment. We did that. And a should have a value of 7. Fantastic. Let's run our tests. And there we go. 3% of the way, pat, pat. Let's move on to the next one. Just going to have a little drink. Talking a lot makes me need water. So, assigning the value of one variable to another. Now, this is interesting. We can also assign, we can assign values to variables, but we can also assign the value of another variable to a variable. My goodness. So let's have a look. We've got a variable, we're starting on the left. We got a variable called myVar, and we set the value of myVar to be equals 5. Then we declare a variable called mynum, and then we set the value of mynum, we store in it the value inside myVar, which is 5. My goodness. Okay, let's take a look now at our code here on the left. We've got var a, we store 7, the value 7 in the variable a, and then we declare a variable called b. And remember, we've got some comments. Line 1, we've got setup. And line 6 has a comment that says, only change code below this line. So I will add a new line here. And our exercise is assign the contents of A to the variable B. Now that's all well and good, but I want to show you all a little bit something on the side, because when I'm coding like this, I like to make sure that my stuff is running adequately. So I'm going to show you all a new thing called console. Is C-O-N-S-O-L-E, console.log. Console.log is one of the most important tools for me to be able to learn to program. We will have console.log and open a bracket. That is a smooth bracket, not a curly bracket, not a square bracket, just a parentheses. And inside, we can put in a value that it will show us in the output down below. Let's test it out real quick. For example, console log 9, check it out. We'll print out 9 in our console. We can also do this with variables. For example, a. Check it out. We've declared variable a. Line 3 assigns the value 7 to a, so that when we console log a, it'll show 7, which is great. But look at what happens if I console log a before I assign the value 7. I'm just going to cut, and now I'm going to paste it here in line 3. So we've declared a variable a, then we do console log a before we assign 7 to it. And look, instead of showing 7, it shows undefined. That's because at this point in the code, this is processed line by line in order. Before we've assigned 7 to a, it shows undefined, which makes sense because we haven't assigned that value yet. Now, what if we console log b? This is going to show undefined because in line 4, we declare the variable b, but we haven't assigned it yet. So that's what we're going to do. We're going to, here on the left, we see assign the contents of a to the variable b. So that'll be b equals a, semicolon. Now, if we console log b as I did here, you'll see that b has the value 7. And if I just change that to be a still has the value 7. So we've assigned the value of a to the variable b. Now this is copying it over. It's not changing a. Let's take a look at our tests. We should not change the code above. B should have a value of 7, and a should be assigned to b with the equal sign. Whew, That's a lot. Let's run our test and see how we did. Hit enter, and there we go. We're unstoppable. Pat, pat. Cool. Let's submit and go on to the next challenge. So we are now going to initialize variables with the assignment operator. What we've been doing so far is declaring a variable and then giving it a value, assigning it a value. But what we can also do is, as you see here, declare a variable and immediately assign it a variable. So let's give that a try. Var box equals 46. So we declare a variable called box and immediately assign it the value 46. Let's console log this. 46. Let's see what we get. That shows us 46. Fantastic. So now we don't need 2 lines to declare a variable and give it as a value. We can do it in 1 line. So what's our exercise? I'm just going to delete my code. Remember, if you're watching this and thinking, oh, I can't keep up, don't worry. This is all recorded, and then you can watch it at your own pace. So define a variable a with var and assign to it the value of 9. Whew. So we're going to declare a new variable, var. It's going to be called a, and space with the equal sign, we're going to give it a value of 9. Oh, 12 Zara just called me out. I think you wanted to log box. Yes, I did. Very sorry. My bad. But we can try that here with a. Console log a. And you'll see that gives us the value of 9. Good. So we've declared a variable a with var and assigned it the value of 9. Cool. Let's look at our tests. You should initialize a to the value of 9. So we've done that here. Let's see if the tests agree. And there we go. Pat, pat. Cool. Let's keep going. We're going through all of them. Ooh, now we've got a new one. Now we've got a new data type. You remember when we were listing out those data types? Up until now, we were working with numbers. But next, we're going to be working with strings. And strings, you'll see, are denoted by these quote marks, double quote marks. So a string will begin and end with these quote marks. Now, let's try that out. You can declare a string variable like this. Let's give it a try. Let's copy that over. Var my name is equals to your name. Semicolon. So we've declared a variable called my name and assigned to it the value of the string your name. Interesting. What is a name? What is a string? Console log my name. So a string, I've just console logged it, is showing the text your name. And this text can really be anything. So any piece of text inside, except for the quote mark. Because a string begins and ends with a quote mark, as you see on line 1. So aside from that, we can write anything we want. Let's try it out. Hello, JavaScripters. Welcome to day 1 of the JavaScript Bootcamp. So you can see it's quite long. And here in the console log, we'll see, hello, JavaScripters. Welcome to day 1 of the JavaScript Bootcamp. So we can write any kind of text. And the name comes from being a string or a chain of characters. So great. Let's take a look at what the exercise we have to do is. So create 2 string variables, my first name and my last name, and assign them the values of your first and last name respectively. Okay, let's do just that. So I'm going to delete all of my code here. We're going to start with var my first name is equals to, and I'm going to go with my name for now. So that's Ramón. And then var my last name is equals to Huidobro, or semicolon. Now, let's try these out with console log. I love console log because it just lets us, test our code, make sure everything is working, and give ourselves some information. So there's console log my first name, which works. And you can have lots of console logs. How cool is that? Ramón and Huidobro. So for lines 4 and 5, let us console log our name. And you can put in any name. You can put in your name, of course. Doesn't have to be mine. And yeah, we've declared those two variables. And Justine says it really well here. Console log just outputs whatever you want. And that's essentially it. Any expression of code inside those brackets will be printed out. Cool. So let's take a look at our tests real quick. My first name should be a string with at least one character in it. My last name should be a string with at least one character in it. And they both have at least one character in them. So that looks good. Now, let's run our tests. Yes. Pat. Cool. Let's submit and go to the next challenge. Quick drink of water. Okay. So let's do the next exercise, understanding uninitialized variables. Now, you saw this before in a few exercises. When we declared a variable and tried console logging it, it showed that its value was undefined. But let's look a little bit further. If you do a mathematical operation on an undefined variable, your result will be nan, which means not a number. Now, let's try that out. I'm just going to delete all of this code real quick. Whoop! Look at that. Living dangerously. And let's declare a variable called a, just like that. And we're going to console.log a plus 1. Now you're going to see here, not a number. We also see reference error b is not defined. Don't worry if you see this. That's because the way the test is set up, it wants us to have that variable b. So let's restore the code to the way it was. I just wanted to show you what it's like to get not a number. Boop. So let's take a look at the code now. var a, var b, and var c. We've got a comment on line 1 that says only change code below this line. So we got 3 variables. And in line 5, we've got a comment only change the code above this line. And then we've got a equals a plus 1, b equals b plus 5, and c equals c plus string. Which, okay, that's quite a bit. Let's do some, before we do the exercise, let's do some console logging. So console log a gives us not a number. Why is that? That's because we tried to take the variable a and we tried to assign the value of a to be the value of a, which is undefined, plus 1. So remember, undefined plus a number gives us not a number. Let's try it for b. Okay. B is also not a number because b is undefined. We set b to be the value of b, which remember is undefined, plus 5, and that gives us not a number. Finally, let's try c. This is interesting. We set the value of c to be c equals c, which remember is undefined, plus this string that says string. And here we see it gives us undefined string. But of course, undefined variable, right? So we're adding the value of undefined to the string variable, which turns into one large string. So let's just restore that to be string. But let's look at the exercise now. Initialize the 3 variables a, b, and c with 5, 6, and IAMA, respectively, so that they will not be undefined. Whew! So that's a lot to do. Let's get right to it. So variable a will have the value of 5. Now, we learned a few lessons ago, we can do that in one line with var a equals 5. And I'm just going to console log a just to make sure that that's working. So var a equals 5, a equals a, which remember is 5, plus 1. That gives us 6. So 5 plus 1 is 6. Makes sense. Let's try it with b now. B is supposed to have the variable of the value, pardon me, the value of 10. So b equals 10. Let's just console log b. So b equals 10. B is equals to b plus 5, which gives us 10 plus 5, which is 15. Now, some of you might be wondering, why are there spaces around these? This is nothing more than for us to be able to read the code better. It can absolutely be done without spaces, but here comes a best practice. This is a little bit stuffy. You know, it's kind of like, it's kind of condensed, a little bit difficult to read. So a good convention, a good best practice is to have those spaces, but they don't make a large difference except for us as readers of the code. Now, finally, C is supposed to have the value of I am a. So let's do that. C is equals to I am a. See, I am a. Remember, we use the quote marks because it's a string. Let's console log C. So var A equals 5, var B equals 10, and var C equals I am a. And console logging C gives us I am a string. Fantastic. So C is equals to string plus string. Mike, that's weird. Can you add strings together? Yes, you can. You can add lots of strings together. What this does is just put them together to make a larger string. That's why you might have noticed there's an extra space here inside the string. That's so that we have the nice space here as well. So I am a string. Now, that's all well and good. I should remove my console log because the tests say only change the code above this line in line 5. So I'm just going to remove that. Take a look at our tests. A should be defined to have a value of 6, a final value of 6. That says after adding 1 to it. B should be defined to have a final value of 15. We checked that already with console log. C should not contain undefined and should have a final value of the string I am a string, which we also saw with console log. And Cartagia, sorry, I hope I'm saying that right, is saying that adding strings together is called concatenating strings, which is absolutely correct. Thank you very much. So we've got that. That looks good. Let's run our tests. And there we go. Pat, pat. Let's keep going. We're just blowing through these. Understanding. Hey, somebody was asking about case sensitivity and variables. Cool. In JavaScript, all variables and function names are case sensitive. What does that mean? That means that you need to be consistent in how you capitalize your letters. So my var in all caps is not the same as my var like this with capital M and capital V. And it's not the same as my var all lowercase. These are 3 different variables. The best practice is going to be camel case. And you can see that here. I was talking about camel case just before. In camel case, multi-word variable names have the first word in lowercase and the first letter of each subsequent word is capitalized. Now, before we do any of the exercise, let me just add some spaces here and let's explore what these camel case looks like. Let's declare a variable called box with many values. That would be camel case, box, lowercase first letter, with many values. This is a variable that's written in camel case. Lowercase b, uppercase W, uppercase M, uppercase V. Fantastic. That is camel case. Now you might be wondering, what other cases are there? Well, there's also all caps. Box with many values. Now you see that's a little bit harder to read. And if you're coming from other programming languages, there's also something called snake case. Box with many values. This is another way of doing it, which is all good. But we want to, in JavaScript, we're going to be sticking mostly, I'm going to be very careful here, mostly with camel case. So that it's box with many values. Fantastic. So that's the best practice. Oh, and here we've got some examples. Some variable, another variable name. This variable name is so long. Mitch says very correctly, the name FreeCodeCamp is in camel case as well, and that's absolutely right. So let's delete my mess here. Modify the existing declarations and assignments so their names use camel case. Do not create any new variables. So let's take a look at the code now. So variable declarations, comment on line 1, and then on lines 2, 3, and 4, we've got var studly cap var, we've got var proper camel case, and var title case over. Then 6 should be variable assignments. We've got in line 7, studly cap var equals 10, proper camel case equals a string, and title case over equals 9,000. Now, you might be noticing we're getting an error. Look at that. Reference error. Studly cap var is not defined. What this means is that studly cap var, which you see here, is not defined. But you might be wondering, but I did define it in line 2. But remember, case sensitivity is important. You can see that capitalization is all over the place here, whereas in line 7, it's all caps. So what we want to do is make these consistent. Furthermore, as explained by the exercise, we should make these camel case. So studly, capital C cap, capital V var. And then on line 7, we want to use the same one. Studly, cap var. Now you'll see the error is gone in favor of this other error. Proper camel case is not defined, which makes sense. So we can see here on line 3, proper camel case is already in camel case, which is good. But in line 8, it's not. So let's do that. Proper, capital C camel, capital C case. Proper camel case equals a string. Whew, almost there. We got one more error. Title case over is not defined. We can see that in line 9. There is no variable called title case over in that capitalization. In line 4, we also see it's not quite in camel case. So let's fix that. Title, capital C case, capital O over. And we'll do the same in line 9. Title, capital C case, capital O over. Now, if you see this, that means there are no errors, which is fantastic. So let's look at the tests real quick. Studly cap var should be defined and have a value of 10. We can see that here. Whew. So proper camel case should be defined and have a value of the string a string. We see that here. Whew. And title case over should be defined and have a value of 9,000. We see that here. Whew. Studly cap var should use camel case in both declaration and assignment sections. We can see that. Proper camel case should be camel case and in both a declaration and assignment. Also good. And title case over should be camel case here and camel case here, which is good. So let's run our tests, see how it looks. There we go. Pat, pat. Whew, good job, everybody. We're just doing so good. All right. Next, we're going to explore a new way to declare variables. We're going to explore the differences between the var and the let keywords. So the problem with var, which we can see here, we've got var camper equals James and var camper equals David. So we console log camper. What do we think this is going to print out? Do you know what? I'm going to try it out. So var camper equals James, var camper equals David, console log camper. Let's see what that gives us. That gives us the variable of David, because in line 4, we declared var camper equals James, which is good. In line 5, we redeclared var camper equals David. So when we console log camper, we have that new value of camper. If we console log, check this out. If we console log camper before line 5, but after line 4, so var camper equals James, console log camper, then we get James, which is good. That means we haven't yet redefined this variable. Camper. Check it out. If we print it again, we first get line 5, James. And in line 7, we console log, we get David. This is called redeclaring that variable, which is all well and good. But sometimes in JavaScript, we only want to declare a variable once. Var, however, allows us to redeclare that variable lots of times. So in order to safeguard that, there's a different way of declaring a variable. That's called let. Now, if we use let, just like var, it lets us declare a variable, but it's a little bit different. What this also does is say, hey, you can only declare this variable once. Now, what does that mean? Let's look at the output real quick. Unknown. Identifier camper has already been declared. And we can see it's pointing out which line is giving us the error. I just scroll down a little bit. Let camper equals James is good, but var camper equals David gives us an error. So let is saying, hey, this variable can only be declared once, which is good. That helps make our code a little bit safer. But does that mean we can never assign its value again? No, that does not mean that. Let me show you what I mean. If I were to remove the var here, now I don't get an error. Why is that? Let's console log and find out. If I console log camper in line 6, you'll see David is being printed out. So I thought you're probably saying, but Ramon, I thought like you can't redeclare a variable. And it's true, you can't redeclare it. But that does not mean that you can't reassign it a value. So camper can be reassigned a variable, which is good. So we've declared a variable called camper and given it the value James. In line 5, we're not redeclaring the variable, we're reassigning the value of the variable. And this is an important distinction to make. And don't worry, I've got a great blog post that hopefully my assistant will post into the chat right away that will explore some of this. Once we get to const, my bad. So this is going to take a little bit of like bending a little bit, but it's, yeah, that lets us reassign the variable value. Now, check it out. In a small application, you might not run into this type of problem, but as your code base becomes larger, you might accidentally overwrite a variable that you did not intend to. Because this behavior does not throw an error, searching for and fixing bugs becomes more difficult. But with let, that lets us avoid this problem. So we've kind of covered the theory here. Let's get right into our exercise. So I'm just going to take my code and reset it to the beginning, or I can just click on reset all code. Are you sure you wish to reset this lesson? Yeah, let's reset this lesson. That way everything is as it was at the beginning. So unlike var, when you use let, the variable with the same name can only be declared once. Update the code so it only uses the let keyword. So here we've got two variables, cat name with Oliver and cat sound meow. So what we want to do here is replace var with let. Line 2, we're going to replace var with let. Cat name equals Oliver, cat sound equals meow. Let's take a look at the tests. Var should not exist in the code, check. Cat name should be the string Oliver, check. Cat sound should be the string meow, check. Let's run our tests. Yes. Pat. Yeah, thank you. Thank you very much, Kiki, for posting the link. Kiki is wonderful. All right. Now we're going to declare a read-only variable with the const keyword. So as we explored in the last lesson, lets us declare a variable, but only once. But it does let us reassign its value. Const, on the other hand, is like let. It only lets you declare a variable once, but it also only lets us assign the value once. Const is short for constant. That is, it never changes. Let's take a look at what that means. So let's ignore this code for just a moment. We can see a console log that says FreeCodeCamp is awesome. That's all well and good. Let's try out this this const here. fav_pet equals cats. And then fav pet equals dogs. Now here's our error. Type error, favpet is read only. That's because we declared a const variable with favpet and called it cats. Favpet is equals to dogs gives us an error that it's read only. We can't change its value later. But you might be noticing, hold on, this isn't camel case. What is this? It is common for developers to use uppercase variables identifiers for immutable values and lowercase or camel case for mutable values, objects and arrays. You will learn more about objects, arrays, and mutable values later in later challenges. Also in later challenges, you will see examples of uppercase, lowercase, or camel case variable identifiers. So what does that mean? That means that conventionally, the convention is camel case. But some people will use favpet. We'll use all caps for constants. So when you see const, you might see this, or you might see camel case. Neither is wrong. This is a convention that some people prefer. So don't worry about it if you sometimes see that and you think, hold on, this should be camel case. By the way, fun fact, this is called screaming snake case, which I love. I think it's such a cute name. So we can't reassign the value of consts. So what's going on in our code here? We've got a variable called FCC equals FreeCodeCamp with the comment, change this line. And yes, you can have a comment on the same line as the code itself. Then in line 2, we've got fact is cool. We can have a comment here as well. So we've got two strings, FCC being FreeCodeCamp and fact, which is cool. Then we've got line 3, which reassigns the value of fact to be is awesome. Then we've got a console log on line 4, which is now printing two things with a comma to separate them. It's printing out the variables of FCC and fact. So we see FreeCodeCamp, which is the value of FCC, is awesome, which is the value of fact, which is all well and good. Let's take a look at the exercise now. Change the code so that all variables are declared using let or const. Use let when you want the variable to change, and const when you want the variable to remain constant. Also, rename variables declared with const to conform with common practices. Do not change the strings assigned to the variables. Okay, so we're saying this variable here, FCC, does not change. So which kind of declaration should we use? We should use const because it's a constant. And we should use the common practice, which is the screaming snake case. So that's F_C_C. So you see that's all caps with underscores. I'm going to use that here as well, F_C_C. Now in line 2 and 3, we declare a variable called fact, and we also use let. We also reassign its value. So that means we should use let. Why let? Because we reassign its value in line 3. So you'll see that the code remains the same. And because it's let and not a const, we can stick to camel case without a problem. So it's still printing out FreeCodeCamp is awesome, which is good. Let's take a look at our tests. Var should not exist. FCC should be all cap uppercase. Oh, look at this. FCC should be a constant variable declared with const. And I made a mistake. Look at that. It should be FCC without underscores. Good thing I took a look at the tests. So that's FCC. FCC. My mistake. Fact should be declared with let. Console log should be changed to print the FCC and fact variables. Kyle Ritz very correctly says doesn't work with snake. My bad. I don't know why I thought FreeCodeCamp should be F_C_C. But it should be all capitals without the underscores. So with that said, let's run our tests. And there we go. Pat. So look at this. So I have, let's take a step back. FreeCodeCamp is open source and completely free, depending on the donations of people. Now, I myself have an account where I donate to them, not this one because we're doing the exercises with them. Now, I want to say this will show up for you. If you can, of course, do throw them a couple dollars. If not, don't worry about it. It's meant to be FreeCodeCamp. So I will just scroll down and go on Ask Me Later. So we're coming up on the end. So we're going to do one or two more exercises. And then we're going to jump straight into Q&A. So we're going to add two numbers with JavaScript. So in this example, we've got const myvar equals 5 plus 10. Myvar will now have the value of 15. Let's take a look at what we have here in the code. Const sum equals 10 plus 0. Let's console log that. Console. What do we think is going to show up? Let's see. 10. Fantastic. So we've added 10 and 0, which gives us 10. Fantastic. So my var now has a value of 50. Change the output. Change the 0 so the sum will equals 20. Fantastic. So now I have to do a little bit of reverse math, and it's kind of early in the morning for me. So let's see. 10 plus 10 is 20. So if I change this 0 to be 10, 10 plus 10 gives us 20. So that's looking good. Remove my console log and see the test. Sum should equals 20. You should use the plus operator. Fabulous. Let's run it. Run the tests. There we go. Pat. Let's do one more. I think we've got 2 minutes before the Q&A. Let's do one more. We can also, so we're going to do subtracting one number from another with JavaScript. And this is going to be very similar to the last one. Just like with addition, we can also do subtraction. 12, so const myvar is 12 minus 6. Myvar should now have the value of 6, as we see on the left. On the right, we're going to see const difference equals 45 minus 0. Let's console log that. Console log difference. This gives us 45. Of course, 45 minus 0 is 45. However, let's look at our exercise. Change the 0 so the difference is 12. So here we go. Doing math. 45. Let's see. That's 33, I think. Actually, I can use console log to mess around with it, which I love. 33. So 45 minus 33 is 12. Nice. Cool. So let's look at our test. The variable difference should be equals to 12. You should only subtract one number from 45. There we go. Run our tests. And there we go. Pat. All right. We've done 11% of basic JavaScript, which is a lot. So let's take a second because we've made it pretty far. Let's go back to the exercises because I just want to, before we jump into the Q&A, let's take a look at what's next. So you can see as we complete these, I'm just scrolling down a little bit. We can see tick marks for the exercises that we've completed. And we've still got a couple more to go. Oh my goodness, we got quite a bit to go. But I'm going to assign you all homework. So again, don't worry if you miss the assignment of homework. We will also post this in the forums and the Discord. Your homework is to do more exercises up until this one here, finding a remainder in JavaScript. So we will start at subtract one number from another with, oh wait, I thought I did that one. Oh no, you know what? I forgot to submit. Silly me, my bad. So do everything from do all of the remaining exercises until finding a remainder in JavaScript. When we come back tomorrow, we will start with this one. So I'm just going to leave it there. That's going to be the exercise we start with tomorrow, finding a remainder in JavaScript. And with that said, and I think I'm 1 minute over, let's jump right into Q&A. Once again, I just want to say congratulations on making it through this first lesson with me. Thank you for sticking around. Let's ask some questions and I'll do my best to answer them. Kiki, if I may ask, could you please highlight a couple questions for me that we can answer? Let's see. If you've got any questions, feel free to write them in the chat. If not, I'm going to scroll up a little bit and find some. Oh, okay. We got a question from Javanpreet Kaur. Why is it called a scripting language? What's the difference between a programming language and a scripting language? This is a great question because it kind of works in a way like subsets. A scripting language is also a programming language. Now, a programming language like JavaScript lets us write code that gets interpreted by a machine. And that's the key word, interpretation. In some programming languages are compiled, like C, like Rust, like Java. So you write your code, you have a program turn it into machine code, and then it turns into a binary. That's called compiled. JavaScript, on the other hand, and other programming languages like Python and Ruby are scripting languages. That means instead of having this step of compilation, they get interpreted on the fly. That is, it reads each line and interprets it. So it's like one after the other. So read line, execute, read line, execute. That's the scripting part. I hope that helps. I'm new to programming and I would like anybody to explain why HTML and CSS are not regarded as programming languages. Who said that? I believe that HTML and CSS are programming languages. You write code and that turns into computing language. In fact, CSS can, I'm not going to go too deep into this because this bootcamp is about JavaScript, but CSS can actually be used to do things like the FizzBuzz exercise, if you're familiar with that. What else we got? Is there a difference between a variable being undefined, none, and null? Oh, we do cover that later on in the bootcamp, but let's take a look. I have a little resource here on the side called MDN, or Mozilla Developer Network. This is a great resource for documentation on the web platform. Now, here's what we're going to do. Let's look up none. I'm just going to declare, there we go. Mozilla's MDN Web Docs is a fantastic resource. Let's see if we can find the difference between, oh, this isn't. Let's look up none. No, it's null. My bad. Yes. So I'm going to make it a little bit larger so we can read it. The value null represents the intentional absence of any object value. It's one of JavaScript's primitive value and is treated as falsy, which always makes me laugh, for Boolean operations. So undefined means that the variable doesn't have a value. It means there's no value assigned to it. Null, on the other hand, and this is going to sound a little bit weird, null is a value saying there is no value. Does that make sense? It's saying, hey, this variable has the value of nothing. That's not like undefined, where undefined means there is no value, like it doesn't have a value. Null means the value is none. The value is nothing. The value is, it is the value of nothingness. It's kind of weird, isn't it? And I'm not sure about none, but I would suggest looking it up. Yeah. What do we got? Can I use JavaScript for backend development? Great question. Yes, you absolutely can. Let me just look up here something called Node.js. So, Node.js is a runtime for writing JavaScript in the backend. You can write servers, you can do APIs, you can do all sorts of stuff with it. I, for example, use it for writing apps, native apps for my computer. So yes, great question. You absolutely can. Check out Node.js. That's Node. Any other questions? JavaScript is called an object-oriented programming language. What does object-oriented mean? This is a great question. Thank you, Michael. What it means is everything is, so the way we store objects in variables, these objects are, the way we store values in variables, these are called objects. A number is an object. An array is an object. An object is an object. Everything's an object. And this is going to be a little bit confusing, so don't worry too much if I'm confusing you right now, because we're going to get back to it in a later bootcamp, later on in the bootcamp. But essentially, objects can interact with each other, and they can also share properties. I'll give you an example. Let's say we have an object where we store the data of a pet, right? A pet can eat food. A pet may or may not be able to fly. A bird is a subtype or a subclass of an animal. It can fly and it eats birdseed. That's that object orientation concept. And I'm giving you a very high level one on it. I wonder if MDN has a further explanation for that. Object orient. Hey, have I mentioned I love MDN? Go to MDN and read up more here. Again, we'll get to it later on in the bootcamp, so don't worry about it. But thank you for asking. Any other questions? Why should we not declare a variable type? Oh, you're asking, let's go back real quick. For example, here in the code, we're declaring a const variable called remainder is equals to 0. And what you're asking is, why don't we give it a type? Now, what is a type in this context? You remember a few lessons ago, we were looking at numbers, strings, and there was a whole bunch of others, booleans, arrays, objects, and so on. These are called data types. And in JavaScript, we don't declare these types. However, there are other programming languages where you do declare the types for a variable. I'm not going to get into it too much because it's outside of the scope of this bootcamp. But in essence, TypeScript, for example, which runs on top of JavaScript, lets you declare those types. So you can say const remainder is a number and nothing else. It cannot be anything else but a number. Or it is a string. Or it is an array. Or it is an object, and so on and so forth. Kardachia puts it very well. TypeScript is the typed version of JavaScript. Kiki, I'm so sorry. I saw you put in a question. Please put it back up. I'm so sorry. What's the difference between a local and a global variable declaration? Great question. It is going to go into a little bit of like what we're going to be doing in a later lessons, but essentially, let's just take some code here. And I'm going to go into some advanced topics. Let's declare a variable called a and give it the value of 5. Next, we're going to have a function. Again, we'll get to functions later on. Function add, function print, var a equals 2. Print, we're going to call the function print, and then we're going to console log a. Now you're going to see, we declare the function the variable 5, and in the function print, we declare the variable a to be equals to 2. Then we call the print function, and then we console log a, and we get the value 5 instead of 2. This is because a is a global variable. Inside the function print, a is a local variable. Now, don't worry about what we've done. Like if you're seeing this and you're really being like, whoa, what's this about a function? Don't worry. I'm just showing an example of global and local scope. We will get to this later. But in essence, global means it's available everywhere in the code. Local means it's only available inside that local section of the code. Hope that helps. So what other questions we got? I'm just going to refresh here. Is there a difference between coding and programming? Oh my goodness, I was not ready for this kind of philosophical question. I don't think so. Programming is writing code. Coding is writing code. I think they're the same. Oh my goodness. Yeah, I think they're the same. Let's look it up. Difference between, I usually just look stuff up. Coding and programming. There it is. There it is. Ooh, FreeCodeCamp answers this question. I'm going to post this right in the chat. Nice. There you go. Hope that answers your question. I always thought they were the same, but it looks like I'm wrong. Any other questions? TypeScript is the typed version of JavaScript. Kindly expound on this. Yeah, so in short, TypeScript lets us declare a variable with a type. So when we declare a variable, we can say, hey, this variable can only have this type. I'm not going to expand too much on it. If you want to learn more, I highly recommend TypeScript. I think it's typescript.org. Yeah. Sorry, give me one sec. So the TypeScript website lets you play around with TypeScript and lets you learn a little bit more about it. But in short, TypeScript is JavaScript with types. That is, you can declare a variable and have it have a type. This bootcamp will not cover TypeScript. This is beyond the scope of this bootcamp. Hope that helps. Why is let preferred over var for variable reassignment? Good question. That is because we might sometimes run into issues where we redeclare a variable. Say we got var remainder equals 0, and then we want to it lets us avoid the error of redeclaring a variable. So later on in our code, maybe we'll make a mistake and we might, Cartagia says, no, it is not preferred. I love this. Please expand on it, Cartagia. I'm very curious. If you want to learn more about the difference between var, let, and const, please read this article that I've posted here. Cartagia says var should be preferred as you do not want to create global variables. Now, I believe it's the other way around. I could be wrong, but I believe let is preferred because you do not want to create global variables. Var lets us create global variables. But we'll get into global variables later on. Is it necessary to declare variables in JavaScript, or can they be used without declaring them first? Let's find out. What a great question. Remainder equals 0. And here's our error. Remainder is not defined. So yes, we want to declare a variable before using it. So if we use let remainder, then that works. Cartagia says var is a later addition, and I'm afraid you've got it the other way around. Let and const were added later. Var was there from the beginning. What does ES6 means? Is it basic JavaScript? Okay, this is a great question. We are actually going to be covering ES6 in a later lesson, but in short, JavaScript, like any programming language, is evolving over time. Now, what happens is that a group of people from lots of different consortiums around the world got together and said, hey, let's have a programming language called JavaScript, which is all well and good. But what happened, one person created JavaScript, but what happened later on is that folks have been making suggestions to the language saying like, hey, let's add this functionality. Let's make it possible to do this and all of that. And what happens is that these versions are given names. So new versions of JavaScript are defined in a standard, and this standard is called ES5, ES6, and that over time. So ES6 is from, when is ES6 from? Let me look that up from. ES6 was introduced in 2015 as the latest version of JavaScript. Now, not every browser will fully support ES6. Some older browsers will not support ES6. So what a lot of people do is they write code to turn that ES6 code into older JavaScript code. But again, we'll cover ES6 in a later bootcamp, so don't worry. It's really important, as V Prevail says here. I love this. Time and doing it a lot will help become better at these little nuances. Don't worry if you don't understand everything immediately. And this is brilliant. Thank you, V Prevails, because it is essential that we cover the basics, not try to understand everything from zero. We've got documentation for that. Our human brains don't hold all of the information, so don't stress it. What's the difference between Java and JavaScript? Great question. I'll give you a short answer. They are completely different programming languages. I don't know where the name JavaScript comes from. I know Java is the older programming language. But yeah, there are completely different programming languages used in different contexts. So Java, for example, is used to write, it was the older way of writing Android apps. A lot of server code is written in Java. They're completely different programming languages, in short. Thank you. I think you need to expand between initialization and declaration. A lot of people confuse it. Thank you very much, Tech Tidbits. Let's do it. Declaring. To declare a variable, we can use one of our three keywords, var, let, or const, and then the name of the variable, the label of the box. For example, my variable. This variable is now declared. We have declared this variable, but it doesn't have a value yet. It is not initialized yet. Once I do that with equals and then a value, which for example is 5, now this variable is declared and initialized and assigned a value. But this can also be a string. Hello. There you go. So to declare a variable, we need to use one of the three keywords, let, var, or const, and the label, the name of the variable. Then we need a value with the equals or the assignment operator. Hello. And that's how you do it. I hope that helps. If not, keep asking, and help each other explain it. This bootcamp is meant to be collaborative. Any other questions? Talking about best practices, why isn't it recommended to use global variables instead of local variables? We're going to be covering global variables and local variables in a future lesson. I think it's in a few days. I could be wrong. So let's save this question for then. Rafael, I'm very sorry, but I want to, in short, global variables can override other variables and become confusing. Their value gets lost or it gets messed around with. So really, better to have a good scope of what your variables are doing. In short, we will cover global and local variables later on in the bootcamp. Any other questions? As we're not declaring data types, so can we operate on an integer and floating point number to add or subtract them? Great question. We're actually going to be doing that. I'll show you what I mean. What is a floating point character? Again, we're going to cover this in a few days or tomorrow. I don't have a good scope. My brain's a little fried. But just like we have the number 5, and let's have another variable. Float variable equals 5.5. This is called a floating point number or a decimal number. What happens when we add the two of them? Let's find out. Console log my variable plus float. So I've added 5.5 to 5, which gives us 10.5. And that's how it works. Hope that helps. We will cover floating points later on. But essentially, JavaScript just sort of infers or assumes what the data type will be. Any other questions? It's okay if not. Let's have a look. I think, do we have any other questions? Let's see. What other, okay. I got a question here from Chibuso Daniel. What other JavaScript frameworks can I use for mobile development if not React Native? don't know. I've used React Native in the past. This is not in the scope of this bootcamp, so I'll keep the answer short. But in essence, React Native is a way to write mobile apps using JavaScript, and I don't think I know of another off the top of my head. There's probably a bunch. So, we got a lot of questions coming in. Let me see if I can find one here. Could you explain the difference between var, let, and const? Great, let's do it. Let's delete all this code. Var my variable equals 5. Var my variable equals 2. This code works. If we declare two variables with var, we can redeclare them without a problem. However, if we use let, you can only declare the variable once. You can reassign it. Now let me drop a console log in here. There we got a number 2. A const, on the other hand, only lets us assign the value once. So in line 3, when we write my variable equals 2, we get an error. My variable is read only. That means it can only be read once. I've dropped a link a couple times in the chat. There's this article on the difference between var, let, and const that is really helpful. What else we got? What's the difference between JavaScript framework and a library? I think so. A library is a chunk of pre-written code that can be reused in another app. Normally, this is done through packages, and there's this very popular one called Node Package Manager, or NPM, that lets us declare which packages or libraries we would like to reuse. A framework is a type of library that enables you to be able to write apps, be it web apps, be it React Native apps, be it mobile apps, be it command line tools. A framework, as the name suggests, is sort of like the scaffolding that allows us to build an app. So a framework is a type of library. Hope that helps. What else we got? Any other questions? We've got a question here from, thank you. Can I reassign a value for var without redeclaring it? You absolutely can. Let's do it. I deleted my console log. So on line 1, I've declared my variable equals 5. On line 3, I've reassigned my variables to be equals 2. And in line 5, I console log my variable, and there it is. We print out a 2. So var and let are reassignable, as Cartagia says very correctly. Any other questions, folks? As we do not choose the data type ourselves, once we declare and initialize a variable, can we check that what data type JavaScript is assigned to it? I think so. I think we do it in this bootcamp as well. What is it? Type? Let me think. What is it? Is type? There is a way to check if something is a type of something else. Let me go on DuckDuckGo real quick. How to check JavaScript data type. Hey, FreeCodeCamp. How to check type of. That's it. The keyword is type of. Thank you. Let's do it. I'm going to post this into the chat. Honestly, that's what I spend most of my time doing when programming, is looking stuff up. Thank you all. You're all like correcting me. It is indeed type of. Okay. Any other questions? Is JavaScript a backend or a front-end technology? Yes. No, it can be used for both. So I showed a little bit earlier Node.js. Absolutely a way to be able to write your backend in JavaScript. And front-end, well, JavaScript was invented for the browser, I think. I believe so. Initially, JavaScript has been widely used in the browser. So that's a front-end technology. When you're writing mobile apps with JavaScript, you're writing front-end code. So it is indeed both. And last question before we wrap up. Oh, no, we got time for 2 more. Wilbert Osmond asking, hey, Ramon, what's a good roadmap for JavaScript? Phew. Do you know what? I really like the FreeCodeCamp model. So I'm just going to hop back real quick. I'm back in the FreeCodeCamp tab I have open. I'm going to open up the roadmap here. So we've got basic JavaScript, which covers all of this, ES6, regular expressions, debugging, basic data structures, basic algorithm scripting, object-oriented programming, functional programming, intermediate algorithm scripting, and then the projects themselves. But what happens after that? Let me scroll up real quick. I'm very sorry to scroll up so quickly. There's other ones that you can do here. For example, front-end development library certification, data visualization. FreeCodeCamp has loads of these, and there's other tools like Scrimba and Odin project. There's loads of ways to be able to get started and find your way to be able to do it. So after you've got the basics of JavaScript down, then you can decide whether you want to look more into backend or frontend. If you want to go into frontend, I highly recommend JS's web development certification, which then goes into HTML and CSS. And then you've got the 3 core parts of building web apps. You've got your HTML, your CSS, and your JavaScript. Again, this bootcamp will only focus on the fundamentals of the programming language JavaScript, not so much not so much what you do with it, but rather how it works. What else we got? Any other questions? I think we got time for a couple more. Let me see here. We got, what is the difference between back and front end? Ooh, this is a great question. Backend is the server, front end is the browser, the mobile device, the tool that's interacting with the backend. That's the high level view of it. Let's go a little bit further down. Now you might have heard of servers. And when you think of a server, you think of a giant machine the size of a closet, sitting in a basement somewhere in the middle of the desert that's like processing a bunch of data at once. And that's kind of true. But servers essentially are programs. It's a program that's sitting on your computer waiting. And a server, and it's what the title implies. It's a server is somebody, waiting to, is a program that's waiting to serve requests. So what does the backend do? It stores data, it manipulates data, and it presents data. So if a client or a front end or a browser makes a request to a server, and the most common interaction of these that you will find is using a browser to load up a website. Say you go to freecodecamp.com, your browser goes, hey server, I need the HTML, CSS, and JavaScript for FreeCodeCamp. Then the server for FreeCodeCamp will come back and says, hey, I got you. Here's I will respond with HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. So that's the serving part. But of course, there's more to it. There's a database that stores all of the users so that it assigns to you which user you're signed in as, for example. I hope that helps. It's a little bit, it goes quite a bit beyond that, but that's the long and short of it. I think we got time for another question or two. Can a person who's really bad at design become a web developer? Yeah, sure, absolutely. You can do, learning HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. These competences complement each other, but are not exclusive, which means you can absolutely learn your JavaScript and learn your front end, your web development. And web development also covers the back end, which doesn't demand so much web design itself. I myself am not a very good designer, but I do web development. So yes, you absolutely can. For a backend developer, what's the next thing to learn after JavaScript? Node.js. Go check out Node.js. Check out Express.js. Check out the MERN stack, MongoDB, Express, React. And I don't know what the N stands for. Somebody in the chat will know. Ask them. Yeah, that's a good place to go. I want to highlight a quick question from Azraz. How about certification? Is this certification acceptable in any industry? Can I get a job when I complete this course? I cannot guarantee that. The FreeCodeCamp certification will absolutely be recognized by some companies. I do recommend continuing your learning from them, but don't get too stuck in too many tutorials. I always say, once you can build something without looking at tutorials, but rather looking at the documentation, then you're ready. Once you have that confidence to look stuff up and apply that learning and understand the basics, then you're good. But again, I can't make any guarantees about job certification. Any other questions? I think we got time for one more. Oh, Mitch says, Node is the N. Thank you, Mitch. Oh, new programmer says, you have to get HTML, CSS, and JavaScript certifications and a good portfolio before you apply for jobs. Thank you very much, new programmer. All right, I think we can do one more question before we have to go. What do we got? Any other questions? What should we practice next after this bootcamp? As said, check out the other FreeCodeCamp certifications. Check out the Odin project. Check out Scrimba. Again, I haven't tried Odin project on Scrimba, but people are always recommending them. Collaborate. You've got 6,000 people learning doing this bootcamp with you. Find folks that you can collaborate with, learn together, maybe come up with a project to work on together. There's loads of options. Ooh, I want to answer this question from Charvia. Can you use JavaScript for front-end and back-end for one website? Yes, because it doesn't matter what they are. The back-end can be anything that does back-end stuff. So it can be Ruby, it can be Python, it can be Java, it can be JavaScript. There's a whole bunch of others. Okay, people are asking about SQL. Should I learn SQL and databases to be a front-end and cloud platform? You can. SQL, I think more commonly nowadays, MERN or MongoDB is quite common. I'm not going to make a specific recommendation on that, but you absolutely can learn SQL. I find it's a good thing to have. Learning how relational databases work is always a good thing. Hey, look, there's a certification in FreeCodeCamp. Okay, I think that's all the questions I'm going to answer today. I don't want to keep too much of your time. We will be back same time tomorrow. We will be back same time on Wednesday. And then on Thursday, we're going to have a guest session at 16 o'clock UTC. So that's about 9 hours later than usually this one starts. Again, it'll be recorded. Everything here is recorded. So don't worry about understanding everything at once. I beg you. Talk to each other, ask more questions. I'll be in the Discord and the forum answering questions as well. Join the bootcamp community. You'll find the link to the Discord in the forum and the Class Central class. Yeah, you can enroll here. As always, you will find the forum here. And remember, we're all in this together. We're learning together. This is going to take some time. We're not going to understand everything at once. Unfortunately, we need time to process those ideas. And besides, being exposed to them is much more important than understanding them immediately. Because later on in your career, you're going to be like, hold on a minute. This kind of reminds me of varlet and const, for example. So keep learning, keep asking questions, and keep on being amazing. And let's give ourselves another pat to end the day. Thank you all so much for joining, and I wish you the most wonderful rest of your day. See you next time.